Plant biology. So our objective today is to discuss biological terms used to describe plants. These are words that you have probably heard when you took biology, and if you are taking it this semester, there's a lot of these words that you're going to hear again in that class as well. So we're going to start off by saying, what are plants? So plants nourish our bodies. They build houses, provide shade, feed animals, and create clothing. So a lot of times we think about plants, we think about the things that make everything look better. We may think about eating them. But the big thing is plants can create shelter for us and food, and that's two essentials to life. They are able to capture light energy from the sun and make their own food, and their own food is sugar or glucose, in a process called photosynthesis. So we'll dig more in detail in the next unit about photosynthesis, but being able to capture that sunlight and then take in things like water and carbon dioxide to create their own food is a really cool process that plants can do. So organisms that use the process of photosynthesis to make their own food are called autotrophs. And I put that in all caps because that is one of your vocabulary words. We could also consider them self-feeders because they're making their own food and feeding their own cells. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, are organisms that use external sources of food or energy to fuel their development. So for people, we eat plants and animals to make our body do the processes we need to live and to grow and all that other stuff, and to provide us with energy. So heterotrophs, good example, are people. We have to use outside sources to get our energy and fuel development. But the autotrophs, they're the ones that can make their own food to fuel energy and keep their processes going. The next question is, what is botany? So, we talked last week about what is horticulture, and that was talking about more of the application of these scientific principles to grow plants. Botany is more of a research and learning of plants. So it is specifically focused on plant life, but it's one of those things that it got started a very, very long time ago with people trying to identify which plants are edible, so which ones they can eat, which ones are poisonous, which ones are good for medicines. So it has historical roots in medicine. A lot of times you think back to like medieval times, if you've ever watched any of those shows, and you have the people out in their gardens and they're picking all these herbs and they're grinding them and mixing them in teas. And there are people, some of this may still work, and we do still use plants in medicines today. So botany is more of a research and a science, whereas horticulture takes that knowledge from botany and it applies it to actually grow the plants and grow them well. So there are different disciplines within botany. So the first one is plant physiology. This is going to be more concerned with the parts of the plant and their functions. Plant taxonomy is more concerned with identifying and classifying plants. Genetics, obviously, if you have somebody that's really involved in plant breeding, so they're trying to make these new varieties and cultivars, which is not a bad thing. It happens all the time, every day. They're going to focus more on, we have this generation, we breed them together to get this one, and then what are the results of that? Molecular biology, that's really getting in deep to science. Economic botany, anytime you talk about economics, you're talking about money. These are people that focus more on botany as a standpoint of how are people using this to fuel our economy and how does it do that? Ecology is more involved with the environment surrounding. And then paleobotany, they're going back, you have these people that dig up fossils, which are paleontologists, but you also have those people that are not looking for dinosaurs as much as they might be for plants. So I know ginkgo is one of the oldest known plants on Earth because there are fossils of it from long, long ago. And so there are people that focus on basically the history of botany. All right, so that covers the botany stuff. We will have some more terms that could be considered along with it, but it goes into the horticulture stuff as well. So this is going to dig more into the terms we use when we're talking about plants. And a lot of these terms we're going to use throughout the semester. So especially with the plant size classification, when we dig into plant identification, we're going to talk about these because when I give you the name of a plant, the first thing you want to know is it a tree? Is it a shrub? So these are some of the classifications. A climbing vine is something that can climb and grow on a support. So you have a picture here of English ivy and it's growing up a tree. So if it didn't have that tree, it wouldn't have anything to grow up on. But English ivy does have these little tendrils that can latch on and hang on to whatever it's growing on. Ground cover, pretty much what the name says. Creeps along the ground. It only reaches a height up to 1 foot, maybe less. If you look at the picture on the right, you see that it's low spreading. That's the easiest way to talk about a ground cover because it is covering the ground. A shrub is a woody plant up to 10 feet tall with a branching habit. I'm not going to say that there's not a shrub that is not taller than 10 foot. There are some shrubs that are taller than 10 foot. But on average, a lot of times you try to keep shrubs under 10 feet tall. So you think about a shrub that's 10 feet tall. It's still going to have multiple branches. It's not just going to have that main trunk like a tree would have. So all of these in the picture are considered shrubs. Even this one, that would be more of a dwarf shrub. If it was spreading more, I might consider it a ground cover, but in the way it looks in this picture, I would call that a shrub. So you see you have different sizes, different habits. And then a tree is a woody plant at least 10 feet tall with 1 to 3 main trunks. I tried to find a picture with a couple of different examples. So this one, obviously, that trunk's growing a little crooked. Maybe a hurricane came along at some point. But you see here, it has 1 major trunk. Now, you might have some trees like river birch or crepe myrtle that'll have 1 to 3 branches or trunks. But if they have more than that, a lot of times it's going to make the tree smaller. So ideally, trees have 1 to 3 main trunks. Okay, so the next terms we talk about are the plant life cycles. These talk about how long plants are expected to live. Now, I know sometimes people go out and they'll buy a shrub and they'll kill it within a year, and that does not make it an annual. Annuals completes its life cycle in 1 year. That means it grows from seed or whatever. It grows its leaves, stems, and roots. It sets flowers and seeds and fruit, and it dies, all within a year time. So some examples of that would be most vegetable plants like tomato, squash, cucumber, watermelon, sunflowers, okra, collards, whatever you might put in your garden. And I did say most. There are going to be a couple of exemptions to that. Marigold, geranium, petunia, coleus, begonia, all of those are bedding plants or flowering plants that we're going to have in the greenhouse, and you're going to learn in this class through Plant ID. And they're pretty common plants, so I tried to give them to you because if you were to go to Lowe's in May, you would see all of these plants. Biennial. Bi is usually representative of 2. So biennials completes its life cycle in 2 years. Some examples would be carrot, cabbage, and Brussels sprouts. Now with biennial, they grow from seed, they grow their leaves, stems, and roots, and they go dormant. Dormant does not mean it's dead. It just means it's kind of hibernating until the next growing season. So it's just resting. So after that resting period, it's going to come back and grow again and set flowers in that year. And then it dies. So it takes it 2 years to set flowers, seeds, and fruit on that plant to be a biennial. Perennial completes its life cycle in 3 or more years. Trees, shrubs, grasses, and then herbaceous perennials. Herbaceous means it's soft-tissued. So if you think about plants that maybe you have in your yard and they look like they die in the winter, but they always tend to come back the next year, those are perennials. Hosta and daylily are just two of the common herbaceous perennials that you'll learn in this class and that you would see if you went in Lowe's again in the spring. As far as leaf retention, I'm sure most of y'all have heard of these two words before, evergreen and deciduous. Evergreen means it's going to retain its leaves and remain green year-round. So even right now, if you look out your window in the winter, it's going to be green. In southeastern North Carolina, we have a lot of pine trees. Pine trees are evergreen. Now, they do lose their needles, but that does not mean they don't stay green year-round as a whole tree. It's kind of like with skin. My body is still covered in skin. Do I lose it? Yes, like we're always shedding skin. So evergreen retains its leaves, remains green. Southern magnolia, junipers, and cedars are other examples of evergreen trees. You can also have evergreen shrubs. Deciduous means it is going to lose its leaves during the dormant season. Most of the time, the dormant season is winter. That's just when plants are not growing. They're resting because their photosynthesis happens best at a temperature that is warmer. So a lot of times photosynthesis is going to happen best between 65 and 85 degrees. It's not too cold for it, and it's not really too hot. So winter, we usually don't get to those temperatures. So that is whenever they go dormant. Examples of deciduous trees or shrubs: maples, willow oak, so any oaks really most of the time, crepe myrtle, sweet gum, border forsythia. So you see here, like this would be your tree. One of your maples in the fall is starting to change color. Here you have a forsythia shrub in the winter. And here you have a river birch. I'm sure most of y'all are probably familiar with the river birch. You drive around, they have that peeling bark. Probably even have them in your yard. They're very common. So why do trees change color before losing their leaves in the fall? Maybe you talked about that in biology or another science class, but trees and plants have chlorophyll. And chlorophyll gives the plant its healthy green color. So it's very similar to the way a bear hibernates in the winter. So before a bear goes to hibernate, he sits there and eats and eats and eats and builds up his fat content. That way he can sleep throughout winter and wake up and have enough energy in the spring to go out and find more food. Trees have that sense that they're going to go dormant. So what they do is in the fall, when the time starts changing, the days start getting shorter and shorter, there's less sunshine, the temperatures start getting cooler, that tree is going to start drawing that chlorophyll into its trunks and its branches. And the reason it does that is because in the spring, it's going to need that reserve of chlorophyll to come back out with buds and leaves and everything else. So they're changing color because that chlorophyll is leaving the leaves, and any other pigment that can be found in that plant is what is showing. So you might see the reds, yellows, oranges. And I know there are some trees that have those color leaves all year round, and that's just because that pigment is more prevalent than the chlorophyll that's in it. Two more words you're going to hear about: turgid and wilted. Most of you already know what wilted is. That means you didn't water your plant enough, it don't have enough moisture, and it looks like it's dying. Sometimes you can revive it, sometimes it's past the point of being revived. Sometimes it can be wilted just from other reasons. Maybe it just had too much sunshine, not enough water. Either way, wilted is not a good sign. Turgid is going to be when a plant is swollen with water. Now, tomorrow we're going to talk about plant cells, and we're going to talk about the cell walls having turgor. And what that means is the plant has enough water in its cells to help hold everything upright. So turgid is not a bad thing. You can overwater your plants. You can have them so swollen that they just kind of droop. But turgid is not always bad. Most of the time you need some turgidity to have that plant stand upright. So you'll see the picture on the left. That looks like a healthy impatient. It's just perked up, looks happy. Wilted, it doesn't have enough water. It's sad. For this one, this is just another term, and I mentioned this a couple of minutes ago. Dormant. Dormant is the stage when a plant is resting or growing very little. Most of the time, again, your dormant season is winter. So right now, you go outside and you're going to see some trees and shrubs that look like they're dead. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're dead. They could just be dormant. So examples would be perennial flowers like mums. Mums are the plants a lot of people put on their porches, and for decoration in the fall, they usually come in that red, yellow, orange, purplish color. A lot of people throw them out when they die, but a lot of times, if you were to plant those mums in the ground and cover them with pine straw, they would come back the following spring. They are perennials. They're meant to live more than 1 year. It's just some people kill them before they get the chance to even go dormant. Deciduous trees, shrubs, if you have a tree outside in your yard right now and there's no leaves on it, it is deciduous, but it is dormant at the moment because it's resting. And then the last section of this is going to be season crops. You have a cool season and a warm season. Obviously, your cool season is going to be like mid-fall to late winter or early spring. Warm season is going to be like that mid-spring to mid-fall. For us, sometimes it's all the way in fall. But typically, the ideal thing, cool season is going to be spring and fall for plants. Winter, not so much, just because it's so cold. Plants are like, not feeling it. But if you've ever had a garden, and y'all all live in Columbus County, so you've probably seen people recently selling collards, turnips, and some of you have probably made food plots with radishes and beets and stuff like that. And those plants like fall weather. So if you're trying to hunt deer in the fall, you can do that food plot with some of these cool season vegetables, those leafy greens. The deer come out and eat it. Sometimes it might be cheaper than putting out corn or sweet potatoes. It just kind of depends. But it also gives them that variety in their nutrition. Sorry, that was a tangent. But cool season plants do like cool temperatures. So a lot of our leafy green vegetables are cool season. Collards, cabbage, broccoli. A flower that likes cool season is going to be pansy. Usually around September, you can start finding pansies. They'll grow pretty good up until about November. It depends on whenever our first cold streak is. And then they'll look like they die. Sometimes cover them up with that pine straw or some other mulch. And then towards the end of February, March, they might start coming back on you because they weren't completely dead, because they are a cool season plant. And just by keeping them warm under that pine straw, they were able to keep on living. Warm season, obviously y'all know what the warm season is. For us, it's very long. So long, in fact, some plants we can grow twice a year. Squash, cucumbers, if you have a garden, you can do an early and a late crop just because our warm season is so long. So these plants like warm temperatures. Some examples: vinca, sunflower, salvia, marigold, zinnia. Again, these are some plants you'll see in the greenhouse this spring. You'll see them out in Lowe's, or you'll see them out in people's gardens. So I know I like to grow sunflowers and zinnias in my garden because they attract pollinators, and those pollinators help with my watermelons and tomatoes and stuff and cucumbers. But they like that warm season.